ready to go to participate. Our chalice lighting marks the beginning of our worship service. I will light mine and share our reading. Then I invite you to light yours, if you have one. And if you like, you can use the chat to post the name of the street where that chalice was lit. Our chalice lighting is by Jill McAllister. The light of life shines through the eyes of each and every person. The light of truth shines through each life. May the light of this chalice remind us that our search for truth and light is ongoing and is enhanced and nurtured by every person we meet.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you all on this wonderful spring Sunday morning. And I want to welcome you also. My name is Ellen Quaadgras, minister here, and it is a month focused on stories. And I want to begin with just a moment of reflection on the painful, ancient story that is fueling the conflict in Israel-Palestine, and my prayer that this resolves soon and deeply. And with that, I want to invite you more deeply into our worship this morning with words by Reverend Lynn Cox. Come, you accidental pilgrims, you who find yourself on a journey of surprise and wonder. Come, you who seek a life of mindfulness and a place to test your thoughts. Come, you who bring hearts of all kinds, heavy hearts, hearts broken open in revelation, hearts full of love to share. Come, you who seek courage, and you who have more courage than you realize. We begin our story again today, gathering as people of all ages, different abilities, different backgrounds, different perspectives. We come together sharing a covenant and a direction for our shared journey and a commitment to encourage and challenge one another to spiritual growth. This path will ask much from us. Let us move forward knowing we are not alone. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts, you are welcome on this journey.
Broken your vows 1,000 times, though you
Let us join together for our Unison Affirmation. You will have the choice to unmute yourself if you'd like to join me in saying it together. And in a moment, it will be posted in the chat as well. Love is the spirit of this church, and service our mission. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and love, and to help one another. Here in this community, we are here with and for each other in a whole host of ways. And one of the particular ways that we support each other is by being present to one another in what is good and what is hard in our lives. In this time, I invite any who would like to share in the chat something that is on your heart this morning, something that is good, for which you are grateful, that is giving you joy, or something that is hard, that is weighing on your mind, or is hard in your heart. And let us gather our hearts and minds for a time of meditation or prayer about our stories and ourselves. Who dreamed you into being? Who helped you imagine your story? Who helped you see your place in the story of the world? And maybe most important, who helped you understand that you could be the author of your own unfolding? All of which is to say, who listened? Who listened until you could hear yourself speak, until you trusted the voice that is your own? And what about those stories of others? Those kept in cramped places of silence for fear of how hard and narrow this world of ours can be. Who needs your listening so that their story can be set free? Whose story needs to be held in your heart so it knows it is worth entering into the world? We say it's about listening, but really it's about love. It is through affection that our stories are born. They are wooed into this world. Let us not forget that. Nor this. It is through loving the stories that we discover the world in which we weave them loves us back. Amen.
Our April Share the Plate recipient is EcoRI News, dedicated to reporting on environmental and social justice issues in Southern New England. Through their reporting, they create a more informed public and provide individuals with the information they need to be better stewards of their environment. The other half of the offering goes to support the good work of this community. You can donate using the link that is now being put in the chat. The offering will now be given and received with gratitude. Our reading today is a set of 3 quotes. The first is from Terry Pratchett. There's always a story. It's all stories, really. The sun coming up every day is a story. Everything's got a story in it. Change the story, change the world. The second is from Joan Borisenko. We cannot wish old feelings away, nor do spiritual exercises for overcoming them until we have woven a healing story that transforms our previous life's experience and gives meaning to whatever pain we have endured. The third is from Brené Brown. I now see how owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we will ever do.
Stories. We all have them. Victim stories, hero stories, denial stories, justification stories, hope stories, defeat stories, resilience stories, and good old country western style or sad, sad blues stories. As humans, we tell ourselves stories all the time. Give us a few random pieces of information and our minds will make something of it. That guy in the department store who's trying on wingtip shoes has a glow about him. He's getting married. He's buying his outfit. He's choosing shoes he can dance in. The neighbor with the meticulously groomed lawn who's out there every day watering, weeding, or planting something. She's trying to distract herself from an unhappy marriage, or maybe she's planning to enter the best gardens competition, or maybe she's trying to impress her neighbors, namely you. Or your boss seems agitated, unhappy, hard to get along with. You wonder if she doesn't like your work, or maybe she doesn't like you. Creating stories out of very little actual information, it's a great gift. It can keep us entertained and can sometimes get us in trouble when the stories we tell become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because we don't just tell and shape stories with our wonderfully active imaginations, the kinds of stories we tell also shape us. There's a question in the theme in this month's Soul Matters theme materials. Are you writing stories, or are your stories writing you? Referring to the stories we tell about our lives. Yes, those hero stories or defeat stories, the hopeless or if only stories, the I did great or failed yet again stories. Most of us have a wealth of stories we tell about ourselves and our lives, and they tend to reinforce themselves. And they are not always helpful. I recently heard a new way of categorizing the kinds of stories we tell and whether they are good for us or not so good. Northwestern University psychologist Dan McAdams refers to these as redemption versus contamination stories. Humans have been telling both types since the beginning of time. Redemption stories are the ones where the protagonist, for example, you, comes out the winner. They are the hopeful resilience stories. Then there are what he calls the contamination stories, where the protagonist, again, that could be you, comes out the loser, crushed, defeated. Those sad blues stories you'll hear on your favorite radio station or Spotify channel. Now, although we do all tell both kinds of stories, some of us tend to tell more of one kind than the other. You won't be surprised to hear that researchers have found that those who tell redemption stories tend to do better in life, tend to be happier, rate themselves as more fulfilled. Whereas those who tell contamination stories tend to be less happy, tend not to do as well, tend to be dissatisfied with life, which is probably why someone came up with the idea of story editing, which, to radically oversimplify, is to take the first kind and turn it into the second. Take the hopeless defeat story and change the outcome. You win in the end. You surmount the odds. You turn things around. For example, say you get fired from your job. You initially feel like a hopeless failure. Now you edit the story, and it's your boss who's a fool and a jerk. And you were too good for that job anyway. And you will find something better that you truly deserve. There are a million ways to edit a story. And once you do, you go about your life feeling more hopeful, energized, ready for that next job or that next thing. So that sounds great, right? My only problem is that when I've tried this, it works sometimes, but other times it doesn't work so well. I tell myself the new story, but before I know it, there's a third voice in my head saying, "Who do you think you're kidding? It was totally your fault." And then this new voice will helpfully count the ways. Remember that thing you did last week? And how about that email you sent last month? And didn't you flub that presentation last year? Before I know it, I'm in an argument with myself and not feeling better or more hopeful or more resilient at all. Or maybe I hold on to that new thought, even though I don't really believe it. I just insist. I push doubts to the back of my mind. I talk louder to myself, to the part of me that doesn't agree. Sometimes that works too. I've gotten through some things that way, but it doesn't exactly feel relaxed. This whole concept of changing the unhelpful stories we tell ourselves reminds me of a fad. I want to say it was in the late 90s when there was this popular idea to put sticky notes on your bathroom mirror. Affirmations. You're smart. You're strong. You're beautiful. People love you. You're good at saving money. You're very patient with everyone. Stuff like that. The only thing is, the third time you look at it, just after you finish yelling at your kids or splurging on shoes or tools through some mail order catalog, which was how people spent too much money back in the days before Amazon, by the third or fourth time you look at it and it's just annoying. Or maybe you stop noticing it altogether. It gets old, faded, and brittle, falls off, and eventually gets swept up into your bathroom trash can. Why is it so hard to change some of our stories? I read once that if you have a thought in your head and a feeling in your body, and if they are different, the feeling is more true. is more true. Now, on the one hand, that sounds really discouraging because wait, are you saying my affirmations aren't true? Are you saying I really am not smart or strong or beautiful? Are you saying I will never be patient or save money? And no, I am not saying that, but your feelings may be saying that, and they can be pretty convincing to you. You can see this whole thinking, feeling thing in action if you try saying to someone, no, tell me what you really think. And if they actually do, they are probably telling you how they feel, and you can tell they meant it. And whether or not you liked hearing it, it will probably feel more true to you too. All of which points to why story editing, at least the way I originally pictured it, doesn't always work the way one might hope. Not only will you know this if you've ever tried mirror sticky note therapy, but you will also know this if you've ever tried to help someone else edit their story. Our cheerful, what if you look at it this way, suggestions are often met with resistance, annoyance, or worse. It's a great way to get someone mad at you. But it's not hopeless. In fact, I have a couple of sticky notes on my monitor right now because I do think change is possible, not necessarily the way we are sometimes inclined to go about it. I have a theory that our self-limiting stories trap emotional energy. Something happened in our lives at some point that was too hard. And the whole experience becomes a tangle of thoughts and feelings that turn into a story in our minds. And the self-limiting ones are often full of invalidation. They are the I can't stories, the I'm not enough stories, the failure stories. Or maybe they include isolation stories too. It's stories like I'm on my own or no one really cares anyway. And the irony is that someone trying to helpfully edit the story can feel like just one more invalidation, just more evidence that they don't want to hear what you really feel. And that can happen even if the editor is ourselves. The desire to edit becomes one more piece of evidence that I or my feelings or my story are not okay, need to be changed or fixed or altered in some way. One more piece of evidence that I am not okay. No wonder we resist it. Counterintuitively, often the best way to open up a limited story, the best way to go about loosening the uncomfortable feelings associated with it is to accept them exactly as they are. Not to get lost in them, not to indulge in them, but to recognize them. recognize the thinking, the story, and acknowledge it. Recognize the energy, the feelings, and feel them. Just don't stop there. Don't get stuck there, because there is something underneath, a larger truth, a greater wisdom, a larger compassion, and the source of a larger story. A story that doesn't try to invalidate the one you already have, but opens up some doors and windows in it. Opens you up to new possibilities. As I was looking for a story to illustrate this concept about stories, I accidentally flipped open a book by Glennon Doyle that struck me as a great illustration. In her book, Untamed, Glennon describes her search to find herself. She had struggled with alcohol, with food, with parenting, and with a whole lot of limited, hopeless stories about herself and her life. And, oh yes, she had just found out her husband was cheating on her. She didn't know what to do. She actually found herself typing into Google, "What should I do if my husband is a cheater, but also an amazing dad?" Not surprisingly, she got countless conflicting answers, all based on different stories of who the responder thought Glennon was supposed to be as a wife or mother. She described herself as lost, flailing, grasping for answers. Until a few weeks later, she received a card from a friend that said, "Be still and know." It didn't say, she writes, "Scour the internet and know." It didn't say, "Consult experts and know." And I will add, nor did it say, "Just follow your feelings or stick to your old scripts and just do that." It suggested a different approach. Stop for a bit. Glennon decided to try meditation, 10 minutes a day, trying to stop. She says the first 10-minute session felt like 10 hours. The only thing she seemed to know was that she was hungry and itchy and suddenly desperate to reorganize the pantry. The only thing that was clear was how uncomfortable it was to sit with the conflicting stories and the feelings and just experience the energy inside her. Yet, she said, after a few weeks, she began to feel herself dropping lower during each session, eventually sinking deep enough to find a new level inside herself that she had never known existed. A place, she said, of knowing. And in that place, when she posed a question about her life, she might sense a nudge, guiding her toward the next precise thing. And then when she silently acknowledged that nudge, it filled her, she said. The knowing feels like warm liquid gold filling her veins, she said, and leading her in the direction of a new story arriving from a different, deeper place. And the more consistently, bravely, and precisely she was following this inner knowing, she said, even if at first it seemed illogical, the more precise and beautiful her outer life was becoming. That all resonates with me. But there's something deeper to connect with underneath all those stories and emotions on the surface. Although for me, that step about recognizing the stories as stories and then experiencing the energy they are holding, I find I have to do that a few times. Depending on the story, a lot of times, 100 times, 1,000 times or more. But the more I do it, the less the original story holds me, the more I make room for something new. And once in a while, moving toward that new place does indeed feel like warm liquid gold. Now, here's the part of Glennon's perspective that I particularly appreciate, which is that we don't have to wait for an old story to completely disappear before we begin envisioning and acting on a new one. This deeper knowing, this guidance, this larger, compassionate, more beautiful story underneath everything is always there for us. And as Glennon goes on to suggest, it has a direct line to our imagination. So that another way to tap into that deeper truth and this greater beauty underneath everything is by engaging the imagination, for example, with a question like this one. What is the truest, most beautiful story you can imagine about your life? She shares 3 stories of women who were struggling with old stories and where that question led them. And I want to end today by sharing these 3 stories with you. First, there's Claire, lawyer and daughter of an alcoholic, who wrote to Glennon while still woozy from her nightly take the edge off glasses of wine. She wrote that she spends most of her time numb or foggy or ashamed. I feel like I'm wasting my life, she wrote to Glennon. What should I do? And then there's Sasha, who married a guy who was distant and cold, just like her father had been. Sasha spent most of her days hustling to earn her husband's love, just like her mom had done to earn her dad's. I'm so tired and lonely, she wrote. What's the right thing to do? And finally, there's Danielle, a 34-year-old former kindergarten teacher. She spends her days and nights watching her 7-year-old die slowly in her arms, tortured by the same disease that killed her first son 3 years before. Night and day, she sits by her son's bedside, feeding him, singing to him, soothing him. I'm broken, Glennon, she wrote. I don't know what to do. Glennon asked each of them, what is the truest, most beautiful story you can imagine about your life? And each of them replied. Claire wrote a story about a woman who never abandoned herself, who faced life on life's terms and was present for herself, her people, her life. And she believed in that vision enough to begin therapy and safely let rise to the surface all the pain she was trying to drown with wine. Months later, she wrote to say that her new way of being is harder than ever, but it's the right kind of hard. Sasha spent several evenings writing a story about the truest, most beautiful marriage she could imagine. She spent a week mustering the courage to send it to Glennon because she was scared to let someone on the outside see what was on her inside. But eventually, she printed it out and left it on her husband's pillow. She was heartbroken when he didn't mention it for 3 weeks. And then one night, she found an invitation from him asking her to go to a marriage retreat. They could both imagine something more beautiful, it turned out. And Danielle wrote back from her son's hospital bedside after reflecting on the truest, most beautiful story about parenting she could imagine. And she said this: I've spent the past week considering your question. I can imagine 1,000 easier stories about mothers and sons. I can think of 1,000,000 happier ones. But I cannot imagine a single story truer or more beautiful than the heartbreaking one I'm living now with my boys. Me neither, Glennon wrote back. Me neither. Let us tap into something deeper. Let us conjure up from the depths of our souls the truest, most beautiful lives, families, or communities, and follow that inclination one nudge at a time. It might take us a lifetime. Luckily, a lifetime is exactly how long we have. May it start today. Amen. Our closing song is called Unwritten by Natasha Benningfield. And I want to share with you a short story about this song, because as I was writing this sermon, that song kept going through my head. In fact, this whole sermon was shaped by it, and I wanted to have that song conclude this sermon. But I have to tell you, I must have emailed 10 different cover artists to ask for permission to use their YouTube performance for this, and I did not hear back from a single one of them. And I went on Facebook, I went on Instagram. I was going to start calling people or showing up on their doorstep when I realized I needed a different answer. I was ready to give up when I got a nudge. And this nudge said, Ellen, you sing it. And I responded politely to the nudge, but I've barely played my guitar this year. I haven't sung much lately, and this song is complicated. I'll use a different song that we've already got permission for. But the nudge persisted. This is the song. You do it. And then I realized one of the stories I want to let go of is that everything I do must be perfect. And another story I want to let go of is worship as performance, and instead welcome a story of worship as participation. So I went with it. I simplified it, and then I just went with it. And if you know the song, I do invite you to participate by singing with me. I am unwritten, can't read my mind. I'm undefined. I'm just beginning the pen's in my hand, ending unplanned. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you could not find, reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inner visions. Feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you. Only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. No one drenched in words unspoken. Live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins. The rest is still unwritten. I break tradition. Sometimes my tries are outside the lines. We've been conditioned to not make mistakes, but I can't live that way. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you could not find, reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inner visions. Feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you. Only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Drench yourself in words unspoken. Live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins. The rest is still unwritten. Our closing words are by Dr. David Breeden. We open the book and turn to a page yet to be written. Open a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a new story into being. And may we together inscribe that page with hope and love and a little bit of liquid gold. Amen. Let us sing our closing, Carry the Flame.